Good evening, everyone. Welcome to The Point and this evening's full council meeting. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Mayor of Eastleigh, Councillor Adam Manning, and as Mayor, I chair meetings of the full council. Some housekeeping before we begin. We are not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening, but if it does, please leave the building through the fire exits and meet outside at the fire assembly point. This meeting will be video recorded and will be uploaded to the council's website. If any members of the public prefer not to be recorded, then please do contact a member of staff. If you are planning on filming or recording the meeting, then please do let us know so that we can ensure you are not filming members of the public that do not wish to be filmed. The Chair reserves the right to ask any filming considered intrusive to be stopped. More information is available on the Council's website. We will now go to the first item on the order of proceedings, Mayor's announcements. On public participation, there is currently no public participation. It is customary for the Mayor to give an overview of the civic calendar. Recently, we were sad to learn of the passing of Angela Rolling and Dennis Tranard. Angela was a councillor for Bishopstoke from 2002 to 2018, and for the Eastleigh West before that from 1998. She became an honorary alderman in 2018. Dennis was town clerk for Eastleigh Urban District Council and the first chief executive of Eastleigh Borough Council. He became a freeman of the borough in 1986. We send our condolences to their families and friends. Since our last council meeting, I've attended many community events. Some of the highlights were the launch of a defibrillator at the Cranberry Centre in Eastleigh, a Christmas event at the Eastleigh Community Garden, and a charity football match in aid of the firefighters' charity and calm. I also attended events to celebrate the 85th anniversary of the Basque refugees and an exhibition at Chandler's Ford Library. On the subject of people fleeing war, last Friday, we marked the first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and underlined our commitment to supporting the Ukrainian and other refugees in our community. I enjoyed attending celebrations for the Pongal Festival, events for the Chinese New Year, and Indo-Pak Food Festival at Pavilion on the Park, which raised money for Southampton's Children's Hospital and for people affected by the recent earthquake in Syria and Turkey. I'm looking forward to attending events to celebrate the coronation of King Charles III. Details for applying for street parties can be found on the Eastleigh Borough Council website, and the Council are organising a community lunch with the Asian Welfare and Cultural Association in Lee Road Precinct on Sunday the 7th of May. One of the themes of the coronation weekend is volunteering, and I was delighted to see that the exceptional work of two of our Royal British Legion Poppy Appeal organisers in the borough has been recognised recently. Rose Timms from the Eastleigh, Chandler's Ford and District Branch won the Hampshire County Poppy Appeal Organiser Cup, and Councillor Jane Welsh took part in the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall for her 50 years as a Poppy Appeal organiser. We are very proud of them and the work they do every year for the Poppy Appeal. And now I'm going to ask our Chief Executive for the apologies, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have apologies from Councillors Bicknell, Bourne, Cross, Dean, Gomer, Mann, Pragnell and Tyson-Payne. With your permission, Mr. Mayor, although not a formal apology, I would like to let councillors know that this would have been the final council meeting for our Corporate Director, Andrew Treyer, but he's sadly unable to be here this evening. If you would like to say your goodbyes in person, Andrew will be in Eastleigh House at 4 o'clock this coming Wednesday the 1st of March. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, councillors, next we need to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the council meeting held on the 28th of November 2022. May I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Proposed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, and a seconder. Councillor Corbyn. Are there any questions regarding the accuracy of the minutes? And councillors, what I would say is I've now got to the age where I have two pairs of glasses, one for reading, one for distance. So I've got my reading ones on. So if you are going to speak, if you could raise your hand, that would be tremendously helpful. There's no need to do a star jump or anything, unless you really want to. Thank you. So are there any questions regarding the accuracy of the minutes? Is there any debate? In that case, all those for? Any against? And any abstentions?
It's carried with one abstention, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. In respect of declarations of interest, councillors, you are reminded that you must declare any personal or pecuniary interests in accordance with the council's code of conduct and standing orders. Do any councillors have any interests to declare? Thank you. Councillors are reminded that the budget debate process, which we are now coming on to, is outlined on a separate document in your agenda packs and has also been emailed to you. Hard copies are on your desks in the peach-coloured paper, and please can I draw your attention to the notes at the bottom of the page, which details the time limits for the proposer of other amendments to 10 minutes and all other speeches 5 minutes. The traffic light system will be used when appropriate, and a verbal reminder that there is 30 seconds remaining will also be given by the Chief Executive if necessary. The recommendations from Cabinet were contained in a supplementary agenda published this morning and are on your desks on grey paper. In line with the process set out, we would usually commence with public participation, but on this occasion, nobody has registered to speak. I now call on the Leader of the Council to propose the item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll propose the recommendations and I'll speak when seconded. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very mindful that the time limits that are set out for the Leader to present the budget are unlimited. And it has been known in the past, in previous times when all party leaders used to speak at great length on the budget, that it's quite possible to take up a good hour or so. But I'm not practicing my Ronnie Corbett impersonation this evening, and so I'm going to be mindful of the efficient times that we live in, fellow members. So I won't run through the new budget in great detail. Council has already had briefings over several months on the underlying financial issues, and there's little point in repetition. But I will give the headlines and spend a few moments looking at the wider financial challenges facing local government. And to be clear, Mr. Mayor, I'm covering the range of financial papers here this evening, so we'll not be speaking to those, which is items 7 and 8, but will, of course, answer any questions. The headline that matters to residents is council tax. And here we can confirm that the Borough Council's own share of council tax will, on average, rise by just £5 a year, which is about 1/3 the rate of inflation. And in doing so, we'll see the 20th year running of the Borough Council's council tax being kept below inflation, which is vital given the cost of living crisis facing residents. We could be the only council in the country with that record, and it's the underlying financial strength of the council that puts us in that position. It must be right to contrast our position with that of Hampshire County Council, where the tax headlines there make for pretty bleak reading. The largest ever cash increase for the County Council at £69.39 for an average bandy household. And along with that, at Hampshire, yet more cuts to public services, with another £132 million taken out of budgets, following the £640 million taken out since the start of austerity. Now, those numbers are pretty complex to understand. The scale of County Council clearly is enormous, but perhaps the way of giving context is to understand that the County Council's total income from council tax is going to be £782 million this year, and that is just £10 million less than the budget reductions that have been taken out as a result of austerity over the course of the last decade, forced on the County Council by this government. And that's even before we look at the medium-term financial position for the County Council, which I will return to because it illustrates the wider problems facing the local government sector. But let's start at home. And I want to put on record my thanks to Sarah King, to Andy Smith and the team right the way across the Council, including all our senior staff, for the work that goes into budget preparation. It's a pretty thankless job. Well, I've given some thanks. It is a pretty thankless job, but this year's challenges simply keep on growing from the challenges of the past. It's worth putting on record again. This Borough Council's finances remain strong. Take a read through Tom Andrews' excellent papers on the capital, treasury management and investment strategies. They're worth spending an hour or two on. If you haven't already, find a slot to have a glance through them, even if you don't read every line, to get a real sense of the Council's underlying financial strategy. More than a decade ago, when we shifted our emphasis to growing our own income rather than cutting services when government started to remove grant funding from all councils, we recognised that interest rates were artificially low when looking at long-term trends, and saved rather than spent the extra income we received. So when interest rates were less than 1%, we budgeted assuming they were 3% and kept the balance in our interest rate reserve, saving for the rainy day that finally arrived in 2022. The interest rate reserve was designed to cover peaks in interest rates over the long-term trend, just as we see now, and expect to continue seeing for the next 2 years. And it's that buffer, along with genuine savings from efficiencies, that has stood us in good stead as a result of the current national financial crisis. Balancing our budget, just as other councils have had to do, also means tackling inflation and the spike we've seen since last spring that could not have been predicted back a year ago. That's where we are today, in an economy that's been ravaged by Brexit, and with the IMF projecting no growth in Britain alone of major economies this year, and the fallout from Trussonomics and Kwasi Kwarteng's kamikaze budget, with 17% retail inflation, home energy prices doubling, mortgage costs rising by 30% in a year for some residents, and even shops restricting sales of vegetables. What is the shelf life of a lettuce? Those financial pressures, Mr. Mayor, that also put our pay costs up by over 6% last year, and will do so again, put very real budget pressures on all local authorities, along with rapidly rising costs in construction, audit fees, and difficulties in recruiting and retaining staff in jobs as diverse as refuse vehicle drivers and property management. It is those pressures we started to address last autumn, and again I'd like to thank all staff across the Council who responded so positively to James Strawn's sensible and pragmatic proposals, worked up with Cabinet, that have taken out significant management costs, paused some areas of spending, and returned those that belong to other parts of the public sector that we can no longer support in the way that we have in recent years. The result of this work is a stable budget looking forward, just as we've secured for so many years. The position we see, thanks to our continuing income from our property portfolio, still puts us in a much stronger position than most other councils. We retain general reserves at 10% of our revenue budget. We make provision for staff-related inflation and the 2023 pay award. And we do this while still reducing our council tax in real terms for the 20th year running. It's a remarkable record, and I'd like to thank everyone in the room for the part they played in that process over that time. It's teamwork, and it's teamwork that we do so well at Eastleigh. But let's take a quick look at the local government sector to get some contrast and to understand the wider position. All councils are facing the same issues, with threats to public services, with no real prospect of change in the short term, as decline in local government remains one of the Conservative government's priorities. Back a decade or so ago, as austerity hit, many thought this was a short-term issue, a sense that this was a transitory change, and that once the financial crisis was over, we might see a return to some of those ACT services, mainly county upper-tier services, such as for youth, and maybe even a restart for children's centres that did so much to tackle antisocial behaviour and give families security. Then it became clear that George Osborne's plans were for the duration of the 2010 Parliament, with serious losses to other adult care and children's services, and stark reductions, mainly again of upper-tier county services, such as buses, the arts, and community grants. After the rest of the developed world put austerity behind it, in the years of Theresa May and Boris Johnson, I won't say that word again, after the words of Theresa May and the word I won't mention again, government, we were locked in a downward spiral, with anger that cuts of necessity have become cuts of choice, with library closures and major reductions in provision and increases in charges for services to vulnerable older and younger people, and with many districts also closing theatres, reducing provision for arts and community facilities, cuts again that we managed to avoid. A certain amount of reflection, I think, comes in here. Reflection certainly that just as in the 1970s, Britain has become the sick nation of Europe. Reflection too, that it's clear that the Conservative government has no real plans to save public services, from policing, where numbers are still down, to the NHS, with record staff vacancies, and the longest waiting list in the NHS on record, and local government where even historically robust councils, such as Hampshire used to be, have reports in front of them saying that they could be unviable in 2 years. Reflection that long-promised changes in local government finance, such as the return of business rates to local control, will simply not happen. Reflection that the Fair Funding Review is now so overdue that there are children in infant schools that were not even conceived when the review was due to report. Reflection that many parts of the country are being asked to dance to the tune of combined authorities and costly elected mayors in return for one-off cash handouts less than half the year of value of cuts in any 1 year, and at the same time promising new powers that many small towns in America or Germany or Australia would simply take for granted as routine. And reflection finally, Mr. Mayor, that whatever any council chooses to do today, and indeed this time next year, it's simply too late now in many places to make a real difference to save what is left of discretionary services and the real ability to innovate. We see our neighbours in Southampton being told that as early as next year they could be financially unviable. Fortunately, we are not in that position, but we can expect to see councils failing, subject only to sticking plaster grants made available to kick the can down the road until this government stutters out of life with defeat at the election and leaving the mess for the next lot, whatever combination of opposition parties that ends up taking over. I said at Hampshire last Thursday that I don't even lay responsibility for this mess with the majority Conservative group there, other than that they were ones that kept backing Conservative MPs who keep voting to cut local services. Because we do need to be clear where the responsibility for this lies. It's with Paul Holmes and Steve Bryan, with Royston Smith and Suella Braverman, local MPs who put councils in this mess year after year after year by supporting cuts to public services. And I am going to quote the words of the County Treasurer, because it just bears reflection again at the depth that Hampshire finds itself in that is now so common across local government. The County Treasurer wrote, "Unless something is done about the increasing costs of social care and the underlying model for funding upper-tier local government, that is not financially sustainable, since it cannot indefinitely make savings in other services to fund the growth in social care. Without fundamental changes in the quantum and distribution methodology for local government funding, it is likely that many authorities will start to fail in this timeframe. And the Spending Review 2024 is therefore pivotal to the future sustainability of upper-tier local government." I repeat, those are not my words, they're the words of the impartial County Treasurer, but telling it as it is. So I make no apology, Mr. Mayor, for putting responsibility where it lies. With every closed library, every removed school crossing patrol, every new parking charge, every lost bus service, it's Conservative MPs wielding that axe. We won't see change until we change this tired and clapped-out government. so burdened by sleaze, incompetence and infighting that even the third Prime Minister in 6 months could be under threat from his own backbenchers over the Northern Ireland Protocol and the spectre of wipeout in local elections in May. The accountability for this budget rests with Conservative MPs. They are the ones that vote year in, year out to cut local government funding, to fail to fund the NHS, to allow private water companies to keep dumping sewage in our rivers. They are the ones that put Liz Truss on the ballot, that enable Trussonomics, and the crippling interest rates that have stoked inflation and the cost of living crisis. But, Mr. Mayor, if Conservatives have given up, Liberal Democrats have not. And that's what's bringing me back to the positivity in our budget for Eastleigh, because our glass remains half full, not half empty. We see this with the amazing work our staff and our community volunteers supporting refugees from Afghanistan and escaping Putin's illegal war in Ukraine. Slava Ukraini. We see this with the still large capital programme that secures new solar power to replace fossil fuels, that builds infrastructure first with the new road link from Hedge End to Allington Lane, taking traffic away from Fair Oak Village Centre, with the work that restores and enhances our country parks and nature areas from Itchen Valley to Flexford, and that has acquired Stoke Park Farm for community use and environmental mitigation. These are remarkable projects we can all be proud of. Most of all, we see it in our housing programme, with a reopened housing revenue account and new council homes to be built on sites around the borough, from the old post office site in the town centre of Eastleigh right through to 1 Horton Heath. We may well build more homes in the next 10 years than possibly any council in the country. And we're a medium-sized district council. Yes, we can. In doing so, we can make a massive inroad into our housing waiting list and also help young people locked out of housing into new homes. That is the difference that we can make, and it's the difference we will continue to make. Mr. Mayor, I hope you are as proud of the work we do as I am. I hope council is too. When I look around local government, I see despair and despondency. But when I look here, at home in Eastleigh, I still see ambition and achievement. That really is something to be proud of. Mr. Mayor, I move acceptance and indeed acclamation for our joint work for this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the response from the leader for the independent group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The independent group would like to thank officers, in particular Sarah King and her team, for their report, and we acknowledge the challenging time local government has been facing. However, it is with great disappointment that I see that there are lots of problems for Eastleigh in the future. I want to focus upon the impact of interest rates, as this will have the most significant impact upon Eastleigh, as we carry almost £2/3 billion worth of debt, and we have a budget which is demanding a 3.79% council tax rise, and at the same time we will be losing staff and our services will be reducing. I know we need to stop blaming a plethora of unforeseen circumstances. An effective council will have a well-defined risk register and will have considered the many likely scenarios which will result in increased interest rates. So under paragraph 58, officers clearly highlight the risk Eastleigh places upon itself, with its net borrowing anticipated to be 607 million, carried by an authority, which means we are incredibly sensitive to a change in the interest rate, as we have recently seen. You will notice that the figures we talk about when we pay back interest are in millions: 7.5 million, 14 million, 16 million, and it goes on. This is not a case of we told you so with interest rates. This is very much about risk. And if it goes wrong, such as the increased pressures the construction industry recently found itself in, where materials have increased not by 3 or 5 or even 10.1%, but by over 25%. Hindsight is obviously a wonderful thing. And now the council finds itself in a position, perhaps having to consider whether it should or should not secure its borrowing. it is stated it is not going to take that risk because the rates are so high. So I'm surprised when the risk register has everything rated at unlikely when it comes to finance. The impact of the pandemic, the exit of the EU, the UK from the EU, the war in Ukraine, I could go on. There are so many examples now where we can no longer say it is unlikely. We see under paragraph 72 that housing brings in some net revenue. However, on the flip side of this, there is now extensive research from the Local Government Association and others that council tax does not cover the costs of increased population. We are fast becoming a housing developer which provides some council services, rather than a council delivering its services. And all the scariest elements are tucked away under the conclusion that it is the future viability of this council. I know this council is not alone in potentially finding itself bankrupt in a few years, but we are not here to discuss other councils, we are here to discuss this one. I've not seen this council lobbying central government hard for a fair finance review, and I've not seen any securing of levelling up funding and what it might look like. We are levelling down, and it is our communities that are being left behind. We are reaching a point, if we haven't already reached it, where Eastleigh no longer offers non-statutory services. It raises the question, is there any point in having an elected council at any level if all that is delivered are statutory services that could be done by the civil service? Autonomy is fast becoming an illusion, and democracy is not therefore served. The reality is much of the current budget could not be changed regardless of which political administration were in power. However, it is the decisions of this leadership and its political priorities that have caused concern and accelerated those difficulties, especially with the level of debt. The Audit Committee last week heard from auditors Ernst & Young during their verbal update that there was concern that 26 million was paid for land that has only been valued by them at 10 million. Then the finance team is stretched and that they are under significant pressure, that there is also material uncertainty towards the high level of borrowing and access to short-term borrowing. Usually, we offer up an alternative proposal. But on this occasion, we are not proposing amendments because it is apparent, having tried to work with the administration to improve services, whether that be improved access to public transport, improved levels of equality by providing support to our most vulnerable residents, as we saw the great shift in access to services and goods becoming only available online, or to meeting our climate change pledge, that despite the platitudes and offers to work with us, nothing materialised. Those promises made every year were broken, year after year, followed by more broken promises through a budget which will see many of our staff, potentially 25%, no longer having a job and putting great pressure on the remaining staff. Ultimately, it will be our residents who feel the burden. They will be paying more, and at the same time are being asked to not expect the same level of service that they previously received, and definitely not to expect improvements. And indeed, residents will see their precept increase by 3.79 as a result of that. When our communities are facing a cost of living crisis, what we need is strengthened services, not more expense from people who are least able to afford it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker-Jones. So there are no amendments there. Are there any other amendments that anybody wants to put forward, councillors? In that case, if we move on to the debate, is there any debate? Councillor Broomfield, please.
Sorry, I missed what you said earlier, which is not really debate, but just if I would have permission to go back to making a comment following on from Councillor Parker-Jones, if I could have your permission to do that.
And that sounds like debate, Councillor Broomfield, so please proceed.
Thank you. Really, I don't disagree with what Councillor Parker-Jones said. I would merely add two observations particularly relevant to Horton Heath, or One Horton Heath. The first is that One Horton Heath is looking to borrow yet another, I think, about £5 million in the next year, on top of all the borrowing it's already had. Listening to the leader discussing the budget every year is really a very good display of what I can only term a very good impersonation of Dr. Pangloss. Everything is for the best in this, the best of all possible councils, and then sort of tops up with a little bit of Micawberism at the end. We're borrowing huge amounts of money on One Horton Heath for a 15-year-long plan, which, by my reckoning, must be at least 18 months delayed already. I was elected to this council in May 2021. There was supposed to be a meeting in October of that year to give permission for the link road. That was postponed several times, finally went through last autumn, and I'm still waiting to hear when work is going to start on that. That's a year long before the road is built and before any houses come to market. So again, it's being pushed back another year before we start seeing any money. So we're borrowing lots more money at fairly high interest rates, at short-term interest. So it does seem to stretch a degree of hope that everything is going to come out well in the end. And the second thing I would comment is the housing revenue account, which again is spending lots and lots of money, has some extremely grandiose and very worthy, I might say, very worthy plans to help the housing need in the area. But a year ago, I asked about its business plan, and there wasn't one. So 12 months later, I asked again about the business plan, and it still doesn't have one. There's a business plan in preparation, but there's still quite a bit of work to be done, and it then needs to be signed off by Cabinet. And to deploy my inner Sir Humphrey, I would have to say it's very courageous to set off on a scheme like this without actually having a business plan signed, sealed and delivered to work out exactly what you're doing, how you're going to do it, and I guess what success looks like. So in many ways, in fact, in all ways, I support what Councillor Parker-Jones said. I'm not laying any amendments because, as I'm the only Tory in the village, I can't. And I'm not sure I would do. I just can't really support this budget. But that's the points I wish to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broomfield. Any further debate, councillors? In that case, I call upon the Leader of the Council. Oh, I beg your pardon. Councillor Tindridge, please.
Let's try that one. Brilliant, thank you. I just really wanted to highlight to members a couple of points about this council's approach to finance. At Audit and Resources meeting, which I attended last week, it really struck me how complicated the approach is that EC takes. And one of the things I'd like a little reassurance over is that the point was made by an officer at that meeting that in order to manage the complexity of EC's finances, it takes a considerable amount of officer skill, it takes a considerable amount of officer expertise, and that's not necessarily something that we'd want to see go or be compromised in any way in how this council operates over the next few years, given that it is so dependent on this particular approach to its financing. I'd also just like to point out to members that everything links together. I thought Councillor House's comments about the difficulty that many councils across this country face, that really struck home. Lots of councils are struggling. The difficult bit is that everything links up. So short-term borrowing between authorities is something which could be of concern. Certainly there was an incident in autumn last year where Thurrock Council, there was concern it wouldn't actually be able to repay its short-term loans from other local authorities. and the government was expected to step in and meet those shortfalls. It just really struck me that everything's complicated, everything joins up. The other thing I wanted to mention was that there is a SIPFA investigation underway, requested by the DLUHC, looking into Eastleigh's approach to borrowing and finance. I really hope that it concludes that there is nothing, that there's no problem. I really hope that it concludes that everything is fine, because I don't want to see this council suffer financially. So I really hope I can have some reassurance on that front. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we're now going over to Councillor Corbyn, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Following the opposition, I wouldn't expect the opposition to say anything different to what has been said. There are some fairly strong words and numbers bandied around, but I see things quite differently, not unsurprisingly. I'll be very happy to support the budget this evening. We've spent a lot of time working through, working on, and making this a balanced, foremost a balanced budget and a responsible budget, and one that, not wishing to repeat myself year on year, and I appreciate we don't want to talk about other councils apparently, but it is worth saying that many councils around the country would be very happy to be putting this towards their members this evening. Unfortunately, they won't be able to do so this year more than any year. Many more councils are forecasting a dire financial future that the leader's already covered, and that includes whether they're district, county or unitary. The government do seem to have managed to cause problems in the whole local authority area, all caused by government cuts, high inflation and excessive interest rates. Eastleigh has always punched well above its weight in many areas involved by necessity that district councils generally and even larger councils would not be seen in. That's to Eastleigh's credit, to use its position to improve the borough for our residents and their families. The consequence is of that yes, sometimes complex financial accounting needs to be worked through. But the outcome of that is this evening's budget, and it shows the outcome of decisions taken by this council. I'd like to add my thanks to Sarah and the team, particularly in the finance department, but actually all staff across the borough. As I say, I'm pleased to see that Eastleigh's budget is balanced and responsible with our financial model that we clearly don't all agree on, but that's fine, shaping a different future to many councils. Years of prudent financial planning, for example, as the leader has already mentioned, putting money in reserves in the good times, allows Eastleigh to deliver the stable Liberal Democrat strategy that has put us in a very different position to many other councils. Like many strong businesses across the country, difficult decisions have had to be taken, and we've not shied away from doing that under Chief Executive James Strawn. But finances remain strong, and as we can see in this budget tonight, the budget will continue to see us through the turmoil, embarrassment, frankly, and excessively increased costs caused by the Trussonomic experiment in September last year, and indeed to years of Tory sector funding cuts. And that's the inconvenient truth as we hear from the opposition. The reality is we have been affected by external factors, and that doesn't mean that we weren't looking at the risks. We clearly look all the time at risks affecting the council. That month last year was a tsunami of issues, and not just caused to this council. And it's worth saying tonight, as we sit here with our budget, we shouldn't forget the household budgets of residents and what those years of government failure mean to many of our residents in Eastleigh. The cliches are real, with many asking, do we eat or do we heat? Welcome to 2023 Tory Britain. At Eastleigh, we don't have the luxury of an HM Treasury to print money for failed PPE contracts. No, we act prudently. to get value from every pound we earn and every pound we spend. And that is what this budget does. As I close, Mr. Mayor, the leader has already mentioned, but it's worth re-emphasising that due to our strong finances and balanced budget, we have honoured the commitment once again to reduce the burden in real terms on Eastleigh's part of the council tax for our residents, as we have done for 20 years. That must be a record. Let's keep it going. I'll be very happy to support this budget this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corbyn. Councillor Bidder, please.
As someone who has a rather well-documented history of sitting on more than one council, I can verify 100% what Councillor House has said and the narrative he's laid out today. The two councils I sit on in Oxfordshire, the District Council and the County Council, at the County Council, we are struggling with the adult social care, and I'm the Cabinet Member for adult social care, and the horrible mess that the Conservative government has left us in, and I've got sympathy with colleagues who are running that here in Hampshire. But it's because Eastleigh has been able to innovate in a way that other councils where we're picking up the baton in Oxfordshire have not done, that we are in such a strong position here. And my time here, coming to the end of my 4 years as a borough councillor on my term, that it's been incredibly inspirational. And I've taken that learning and I've applied that to Oxfordshire. And the councils there could be doing so much of what Eastleigh is doing here. Its investments, its strategy, enabling us to cut the council tax for 20 years running and protect services at the same time and investing in the environment. All the things that Keith mentioned, it is genuinely inspirational. And it's that perspective, is sitting on those different councils and seeing the stark difference that makes me so pleased to have had some time here to learn what we can do at a borough like Eastleigh Borough, which has had such a long period of Liberal Democrat control, and take that inspiration to other councils where I'm working. So I would wholeheartedly be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Holes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I've been on this council 20 years, and throughout that entire time, I've been very proud to support below inflation budgets that have consistently come out of this council, that our residents have benefited from because we haven't cut services during that time. And I'm pleased to see that this is on the table again tonight, and I'm happy to support it. It's quite clear that we're one of the very few, if not the only council of our level in the country that's been able to boast that fact. So I think we should be tremendously proud of what we've achieved here on that. Secondly, I would like to just confirm that Councillor Tidridge mentioned the investigation team from the government, looking at the way we carry out our asset portfolio matters and finances, etc. I can assure you that our officers and the council, in fact, has welcomed the investigation with open arms and has done everything they can to support them in their investigation. We're not hiding anything, and we are absolutely confident that there will be no issues. But the fact is that not all councils have done that. We have been open and upfront, and we have every confidence that things will be fine on that. We are also keeping fully abreast of what's happening, thanks to our officers and the relationship with myself and obviously Cabinet. As I said, I'm happy to support this budget. I think we do a tremendous job. And had we not put in 20 years of below inflation increases, had we not seen the problems that were going to come forward for local government with the removal of the government grant, which used to be a significant amount, far more than our council tax receipts, that allowed local government to operate in the good old days when I was first a councillor back in '95. By using and creating our asset portfolio, we've been able to substitute the loss of that significant government grant. A lot of councils are not, or have not, and it's too late now. It's very difficult now to actually build up an asset portfolio in the current climate. So that's the road we've gone down. And the fact is that had we not, we would be in a far worse financial state than we are now. We would not have been able to provide our residents with below inflation increases on their council tax for our portion. And we would not have been able to support areas of work that was traditionally carried out by the county council but has been cut over recent years. Sadly, we are now finding it difficult to support libraries, support youth services, support social care support, and so on. That was always traditionally county council. It's not anymore. They've cut it pretty well. And we have been, for the last 20 years, supporting those areas of work within our LACs. And we're trying really hard to keep that going, but it is not easy. Museum services, that sort of thing. So I think we've done a really good job, and we continue to do the best job we can. And there are going to be many councils. We don't want to talk about what other councils are doing because that's their issue. But there are going to be many councils over the next 2 years that are going to be really, really struggling. And I'm confident that we can keep away from that and keep going forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Curl, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Some of the points have actually already been raised, actually, and as Councillor Holes was going on, I was starting to mentally tick off, actually, some of the things I was going to say. So thank you for that, Councillor Holes. It's a shame you're not sat a little bit closer to me, otherwise I might have been able to nudge you in the ribs. I actually have read the papers, surprisingly, unsurprisingly, right the way through, and I have to say that I'm actually really buoyed up by actually this budget that's been put together, and I have to say I would like to pass on my sincere thanks actually to the whole team that have worked so hard to put this together, because I know it's not an easy task to do. And yes, we are under pressure. We definitely are under pressure. I can certainly see that. But with the fact that we are able to actually deliver this balanced budget with actually a very low increase to the council tax compared with some other authorities and other bodies, shall we say, is a testimony to the strategy that this council took a number of years ago. And they took it a number of years ago because actually not only do we understand that potentially the grant that was going to come from government was going to be cut over a period of time and potentially disappear, but also because it was the right thing to do. And I remember a number of years ago when the council decided that it was going to do alternate weekly collection for its waste, and it was going to then collect food waste instead of what the normal strategy was, which was basically just throwing it all into the waste cart and it disappearing off, because we knew it was the right thing to do at the time. Everyone thought that we were completely bonkers when we did that, and now we're in a position now with the Environment Bill where every authority is going to have to collect their food waste. We did it with a financial strategy where we could have sat back and decided to do nothing and just look to the government and say, look, you know, you need to give us lots of cash to deliver our services for the community, whilst obviously raising some council tax ourselves, but to bolster everything else up, we would look to that government grant. But we decided to come up with a financial strategy where we would be able to invest in a portfolio of investments that were prudentially borrowed against, which clearly obviously would have income that then generated enough against the value of that property or that investment that would not only give us a revenue that was solid over a long period of time, the lifetime of the borrowing, but into the future, but also in effect would be resilient with regards to having budgets, if you like, for interest rate fluctuations and reserves for voids and everything else. So prudentially borrowed over a period of time, which means that it wasn't then going to be a risk, if you like, to council taxpayers, short, medium or long term, because obviously clearly you can offload assets and everything else, but obviously tied up into obviously contracts with with tenants, etc., that would then guarantee that income into the future. That meant that we were then able to do things that other authorities, in effect, that this authority wanted to do, and we were then looked upon as being with envious eyes by other authorities because we'd taken that strategy and that approach a number of years ago, which means we were able to build that up over a period of time, whilst also not only expanding our services, bolstering our services, but also delivering things that other councils could only look at with, as I said, envious eyes. We continue to do that as well. We have a budget here which is balanced, and yes, because of Trustonomics, because of the downturn, because obviously we've got cost of living crisis, we've got a war in Ukraine, we had a pandemic as well. You really couldn't have made it up when you start to look at these things about what has come over the horizon. And yet, after all of that, we're still able to deliver a balanced budget whilst also keeping our council tax down. Honestly, you genuinely could not have written that script better than what it is. Yes, we are under pressure. Yes, we are continuing to look prudentially and very carefully at everything we do. But we are still moving forward. We are still delivering schemes. We are still looking after the vulnerable in our communities because we know that they matter. They have always mattered and they will continue to matter. Yes, we are under pressure. I remember, I'm fortunate to be on 2 councils myself, and I know we're not supposed to be talking about other councils, but we have seen those warnings up and down the country where they have been firing at the government that they are in significant positions of financial stress and potentially are going to fall over. I am fortunate enough to be on the county council as well, and I have seen since I've been elected in 2009 to the county council that for the majority, if not nearly all of the time I have been on there, they have been cutting their services, their discretionary services, to the point where there is basically nothing left. They are now at the end game. There is nothing left to cut. And I know Councillor House obviously outlined some of those things, and I'm red. I do apologise. My apologies. Sorry. All I would just like to say is they could have taken a different approach, as indeed some other councils could have done. If they'd done that earlier, they may not have been in the position that they are in now. Luckily, we did. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further debate, councillors? In that case, I ask the Leader of the Council to reply to the debate, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And inevitably, given the national finances, this was going to be a slightly sombre debate. That's to be expected in those circumstances. I'd like to thank some of my colleagues for some of the comments they've made, because that avoids me needing to repeat them. I thank them for that, to Ian and to Rupert. And to mention Rupert's point about the county council, one thing we were told on Thursday was that the senior management team of the county will be this summer having to look for an extra £100 million worth of cuts to try to secure the future of the organisation. There's no disrespect to any councillors at the county council of any political party, because they're having to do what the government's given them the task of doing because of lack of funding. And that £100 million is based on what would doing the bare minimum look like. And that is the point about removing discretionary services. The Councillor Parker Jones was trying to suggest was our problem. Well, actually it's not, because we are maintaining discretionary services at a very high level. Many councils would have closed this building and flogged it off. The same with the Bury Theatre. They would have shut country parks or find some way to privatise them. We've not done anything like that, and we won't. We maintain high quality discretionary services and still doing some of the things that we took over from the county council when the county council stopped doing them. Through our local area committees on arts, through our local area committees on culture, through our local area committees on a whole raft of things. It's only in the last few years we've assisted the opening of 2 libraries, one in Lowford, one in Hamble, at the same time as the county are closing them in other parts of the county. This is not something which we need to shy away from. We are doing discretionary services because they're the right thing to do. We maintain this ambition that our job as a council is to improve the quality of life for our residents, not just to deliver statutory services. And that does mean we do spend money in different ways from many of the places. It does mean we've taken it as our job to try to fix the housing crisis, for young people in particular, but not just for young people. Because I still find it a just absolute disgrace that my generation were able to buy their own homes as a matter of routine in many cases in their early 20s on modest incomes. You know, I see Dave saying, snicker, snicker. It's not possible, is it? You know, look at one of the younger members in the room. I look at Cameron. What's the idea of buying a house feel like? It feels like it's a dream. It's not something that's on the horizon. And that's a disgrace. And that's because our governments have failed our people. And we can do and we will do something to try to sort that out by giving younger people a route into home ownership through lifetime tenancies and market rented stock that gives them the ability to save up to get onto the housing ladder, and by improving and increasing the quality and quantity of stock in the right places. And it's a disgrace that some councils aren't prepared to even think about doing that because it's too difficult. If it's too difficult, go and do something else, frankly, because it's our job as councillors to try to fix things, to try and make things better where we can. We can't always do that, but we should at least try, shouldn't we? Councillor Parker-Jones, somewhat inevitably, her glass was half empty rather than half full. I don't recognise the council she describes. I really don't. I look at our risk register on a regular basis, and we proved we got it right. Because we said all those years ago we would budget at 3%, even though we were only paying a 0.5% interest rate, and therefore we banked the rest for that rainy day, and that rainy day has now come. And we know that, over time, average interest rates over a generation, they're going to be at that 3% level, give or take just a fraction. And therefore, as long as we're budgeting at that basis, we can manage to deal with these peaks, because we had a trough that's funded the peak, and we'll go back into a trough in the future. And that's exactly what a risk register is meant to do, and it's exactly why we've done it that way. And to describe that as therefore being a problem, well, it's not something I recognise. It's not the council that the rest of us are in. And I'm equally glad that Councillor Parker-Jones isn't managing our finances. She suggests we should move from short-term to long-term borrowing. Well, that would be a crazy thing to do at the moment, wouldn't it? With interest rates at record levels, they might just peak a little bit higher than they are now. They might just. But where they're going to be in a year's time is almost certainly a fair bit lower. 2 years' time, lower still. And that's not just me speaking. That's our Treasury Management advisors, Arlene Close, speaking about where the market will go. So yeah, we can move some of our short-term borrowing to long-term borrowing at the right prudent time. And we have acted prudentially. We've acted pretty cautiously along the way. We've had so many deals offered to us from all sorts of organisations and bodies over the years, the vast majority we say no to, because we are actually very cautious. But we're cautious and pragmatic, and sometimes accept that the risk of doing nothing is greater than the risk of intervention. And it's that record of intervention that puts us in a very different place to many other councils. Ambition, therefore, is part of our DNA. But so is working closely with our auditors. And we've got a brilliant relationship with our auditors. We probably pay them a bit more than most councils do, because yes, our accounts are a bit more complicated. Well, they're complicated because we're doing things. We're not just shutting down and saying it's too difficult, which so many councils around the country have done, because they've lowered their horizons because government suggests maybe it is just too difficult after all. That's not our council, that's not our place. So I have no problem at all about our accounts being a bit more complicated. Quite right too. Councillor Brimfield, I think I'm going to muddle my Dickens quotes here, but the Mr McCorb reference, that's definitely Ghosts of Olsen's past. It really is. And we hear the same thing from, we used to say the Conservative group, we now say the Conservative councillor. We've heard the same thing over the years from Conservatives on this council, which is always, again, doom and gloom. We can't do this, we shouldn't do that. It's all too difficult, isn't it? Well, again, if it's too difficult, find something else to do. We are here to do difficult things. There's no point doing anything else other than that. Councillor Tidridge talks about SIPFA. We welcome SIPFA. We really do. When the Department for Levelling Up and Housing Communities, or whatever the phrase is these days, first said last year, they wanted to have a look at councils with high records of investment. We said, bring it on. We actually want government to understand us better. We really do. Some of us have been here long enough to remember the era before Pol Pot was in charge. Eric Pickles was in charge at the department in 2010. Because before Eric Pickles was in charge, government collected data. from councils. It asked questions. It said, how much are you spending on this? How much are you spending on that? What are your performance indicators on this, on that? How are your finances doing? Are they up, are they down? Are they moving sideways? What's the story here? Government was inquisitive and asked questions. Eric Pickle said, we don't want to ask questions. We don't want to collect data. It's not our job, I believe, in small government. He abolished the Audit Commission. I know I'm being geeky and old-fashioned here, but the Audit Commission did a brilliant job. It was properly resourced to understand how public services worked. Not just in local government, but in the health service too. Maybe the health service could do with better advice and support along the way. Just maybe. Maybe? Yeah, they should, shouldn't they? And the Audit Commission did all that work. And it actually said that councils should do the kind of things that we're doing. Be more commercial. Be more innovative. Understand that risk is about doing things, not just stopping doing things. That's what the government's Audit Commission said. And we did exactly that. So CIPFA have been asked to do a piece of work by the department, basically to help government understand how local government works. So we say, bring it on. We really do. Because we can help. Now, I've heard stories in the local government press, councils saying, we don't want the government coming and looking at us. Well, I think that's a bit defensive. I want government to look at us. I actually want to be able to make the case to government that local government can and could be better. And actually part of that is about government being prepared to invest in and trust local government to do more things. Because all the evidence around the world says that most effective societies are ones where local government is truly empowered to do amazing things. We've tried to do that within the ridiculously low powers we've actually got. Elsewhere in the world, it's a matter of routine. I had the benefit of being in a city the other side of the world just before Christmas, where a significant city, a bit bigger than Southampton, not that much, well, a fair bit, but they had a free bus service running their city centre, where you didn't really think about wasting the bus because it arrived every 4 minutes and was free. Wasn't it surprising there wasn't much traffic congestion in a popular city that had grown up over the years without the infrastructure catching up? Because people used the buses because they didn't have to wait. It's not rocket science, some of this stuff. It really isn't. And that's why high density housing works too, as long as you get it right. So for all these things, we've got to be prepared to continue to innovate, to continue to challenge, to continue to be different. And that's why I thank Steve Holes and Tim Bearder for their contribution this evening, because they've told the story of other places and their experiences there. I've always found it helpful to understand what happened in Christchurch in the 1990s. It helps inform some of our decision making. It's helpful to have a reference point from Oxfordshire about what's going on there too, the problems they've got, the challenges they've got, the areas of success, the areas where they simply can't make it add up. I spend a fair bit of my time working for the Local Government Association, advising and supporting and mentoring other councils around the country. And I learn from doing that. And I know as a result of that, we are in a remarkably good place compared to most. But we can always get better. We can always get better. And part of our ambition is to always keep scrutinising, looking closely at what we're doing and saying what can be improved for the future. That's our mission. That's our duty to our residents across the borough, year after year after year. So for all these reasons, Mr. Mayor, I hope Council will reject the glass half empty approach from the opposition, endorse and support continued innovation and ambition and delivery of homes that matter, of an environment that matters, and value for money for our residents in a cost of living crisis, and support this budget this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I believe now we pass on to our Democratic Services Manager for the recorded vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Asman, Councillor Attrell, Councillor Bearder, Councillor Beer, Councillor Broadhurst, Councillor Broomfield,
Against.
Councillor Buckley, Councillor Corbyn, Councillor Caldry, Councillor Craig, Councillor Dedier, Councillor Dogood, Councillor Garton, Councillor Groves, Councillor Hadaway, Councillor Holes, Councillor House, Councillor Irish, Councillor Jarvis, Councillor Kinlock, Councillor Curl, yourself, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Park, Councillor Parker-Jones, Councillor Pretty, Councillor Spencer, Councillor Tennant, Councillor Tidridge, Councillor Tyson-Payne, Councillor Welsh. That's clearly carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, next on the agenda is the Council Tax Resolutions 2023/24 report. May I have a mover, please?
Move to print, Mr Mayor.
Is the motion seconded? Councillor Corbyn, is there any debate? In that case, I believe we're over to our Democratic Services Manager again for a recorded vote.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Asman. Councillor Attrell. Councillor Bearder.
4.
Councillor Beer. Councillor Broadhurst. Councillor Broomfield.
Against.
Councillor Buckley. Councillor Corbyn. Councillor Couldry. Councillor Craig. Councillor Dedier. Councillor Dogood. Councillor Garton. Councillor Groves. Councillor Hadaway. Councillor Holes. Councillor House. Councillor Irish. Councillor Jarvis. Councillor Kinlock. Councillor Curl. Yourself, Mr Mayor.
4.
Councillor Marsh. Councillor Park. Councillor Parker-Jones. Councillor Pretty. Councillor Spencer. Councillor Tennant. Councillor Tidridge. And Councillor Tyson-Payne. Councillor Welsh. That's clearly carried, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, we now have the Capital, Investment and Treasury Management Strategy. The recommendations from Cabinet were sent as a supplementary agenda this morning and are on grey paper on your desks. May I have a mover, please?
Move to printed, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. And is the motion seconded? Councillor Corbyn, any debate? In that case, by a show of hands, all those for? Against? And abstentions?
That's carried, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. We now have the Corporate Plan 2023 to 26. May I have a mover, please?
I'll move, Mr Mayor, and we'll speak briefly 1 second. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the motion seconded? Councillor Corbyn, and is there any debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So this is a fairly straightforward refresh of our corporate plan. It does pick up some of the changes that have happened over the last couple of years, most notably the extra emphasis that we're placing on housing delivery as part of tackling the housing crisis. So there shouldn't really be any surprises here. This has been through a scrutiny process, which means that lots of people have the opportunity to take a look at it and read through it. Again, I'd say, as with earlier papers, if you haven't had a read through and you want something to do on a Sunday afternoon, particularly when Southampton are playing badly, this is a good thing you can do in that slot, Ian. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further debate? In that case, all those for, please. All those against? And any abstentions?
That's carried, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. We now come on to the Citizens of Honour nominations. May I have a mover, please?
I'll move, Mr Mayor, and again we'll speak briefly 1 second.
Thank you. And a seconder, please. And is there any debate?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, so this is, for those who aren't familiar with the process, several decades ago, some bright spark came up with the idea that we should recognise people across our community who put in voluntary work, usually over quite some period of time, or for an exceptional one-off event, and came up with this idea for Citizens of Honour. It's something we do roughly every couple of years and typically make 2, 3 or 4 awards based on a shortlist that's put together by the party leaders acting collaboratively with the Mayor and advice from our staff. It's always a painful job, actually, sorting a shortlist out for something where there's quite a few nominations. But we always end up with a degree of consensus. And we have again this year, and the 3 names that are in front of Council this evening, I hope will be welcomed into the Mayor's parlour, or however we're doing it this year. I think at the annual meeting, isn't it? The annual meeting to be presented by the new Mr Mayor. When he takes office as part of that ceremony. So happily support the recommendations that are here, and hopefully it will be a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Any further debate, councillors? In that case, all those for, please. Anyone against? And any abstentions?
That's unanimous, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Next, councillors, we come on to the Cabinet Member Statements. Cabinet members who have submitted a statement, is there anything you wish to add? You have 1 minute each. Anybody going to be brave and put their hand up? Councillor Craig, please.
Just proving I was brave, Mr. Mayor, that was all. Just to say that, put on record the thanks to staff who put on these non-statutory events for our residents, for their health and well-being. I've attended several of them. They are well attended. As I say, they are non-statutory, but they meet a hell of a lot of residents and improve their health and well-being.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the statements, councillors? No, in that case, thank you ever so much. We now come on to the resolved items for noting and questions only. Councillor House, would you please move that the items listed at section 12 of the agenda be placed before council for noting and questions?
I'll happily move the whole lot, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Corbyn, are there any questions? Thank you. Councillors, thank you. This now concludes the meeting. The next meeting will take place on Monday, the 22nd of May, 2023, back here at The Point, which will be mayor making, including the annual general meeting. May I take this opportunity to wish those that are standing in the forthcoming elections luck, and those that are not for their service. I wish you all a good evening. Thank you.